welcome to everyone, and it's great to have you here. This is actually the 28th edition of Europe Calling and my Europe webinar. We have Alyn Smith, who has already escaped to the hotel. We are all in Strasbourg. Alyn is a really great member of this parliament. He represents Scotland, and he is famous for having given the best ever anti-Brexit speech in the European Parliament. I would like to say that it was widely watched. We have Molly Scott Cato. We have been working together in Econ, and we were really good friends, I have to say. And that was a great cooperation over all the years. And I'm proud that we will do everything that she stays with us. So there's no reason to miss more. And of course, my beloved colleague from North Rhine-Westphalia, from the great city of Gelsenkirchen, and she's our Brexit expert for the German Greens here in the Parliament, and also working on the matter here in the House.
And she has been a solid colleague all the way through, and whenever there's a difficult part of Brexit, and I might end up in tears, she's been there with me all the way through. Fantastic solidarity.
And she's known for this in Germany as well. Well, anyway, so we decided to set up that extra Europe Calling because of the new situation since the last summit. And I think it is really interesting to analyze this and to understand what has changed. So this is also why I'm moving now my own language to bad English, and I'm curious to listen to all of you. So we will have German participants, but also participants from all over Europe. Also in Britain, you spread it. So I'm curious to see this exchange. Unfortunately, we had a technical problem. This means I cannot moderate at the moment who will have to speak. So my staff in Düsseldorf, Max, will take over. And he has a long history because he was actually chairing the Greens in Cambridge when he was doing his PhD. So he's a natural person in between Greens in England and Wales and Greens in North Rhine-Westphalia.
That is the most Remain city in the whole country. When I go to Cambridge, I'm totally at home. My son is a doctor there, and so I go there. And I get off the train and I breathe as quietly because nobody in Cambridge wants Brexit.
Okay, that's great, and I'm sure Max loves to hear this. So to start off, I think first to give you the floor. First, perhaps as we are all Greens, we are listening to Alyn. I suggest this because you are a member of our group. For many Germans, that's a bit unusual. Why do we have the Scottish National Party in the Greens? But actually, we agree on more or less all issues. So rarely we vote different lines. Really, we have an alliance between Greens and I would call them progressive regionalists. That's how I would phrase for a German audience what is the European Free Alliance. And actually, we very much agree that we do not like Brexit to happen, and Scotland, as you were pointing out, didn't want it. There was a solid majority against Brexit in Scotland. But I'm curious to hear from you how you analyze the current state of Brexit. Obviously, many Germans are fed up with this. So 3 years of Brexit debates, you must be fed up even more. But we would like to understand, where are we? Do we have now a real chance to make Brexit history? And therefore, I'm curious to hear and to listen to your analysis on the state of Brexit, and also with a view to the upcoming European elections, which are now likely to happen also in the United Kingdom. Please, Alyn.
Sure. Well, Sven, thanks very much, and very happy to do this webinar. It's like living in the future. I've done some of these things for remote communication to our islands or to other places, but great to see you all, and great to see you all at home in various places. Briefly, to explain the relationship between the National Party of Scotland and the Greens, we have a 20-year cooperation where we've worked within the Green European Free Alliance group. As you rightly say, the The Greens have a collaboration with the European Free Alliance, which is the Basques, the Catalans, the Scots, the Welsh, and a number of other parties as well. We have the Russian-speaking Latvian party, because IFA is about various places that are looking for greater autonomy and regional diversity, linguistic rights as well. And within Scotland, that's about where the similarities in IFA end, I have to say, because each place is different, each place is looking for something different in itself. And from a Scottish perspective, we are unusual in that we are utterly progressive nationalists, and I very much appreciate that nationalism is a word that a number of people have some issues with good reason. But what we are is we're independentists. We want to see an independent Scotland, but we want to be independent not so that we can be separate or apart or exclude people. We want to be independent so that we can join. So that we can join the world, we can join the EU as ourselves, we can join NATO, we can join the UN, we can join all the fora of the world in order to make our case. Now, Scotland's one of Europe's ancient nations, so we've been independent for far longer of our country's history than we have been part of Great Britain, which is part of the United Kingdom. We only merged in 1707 by an international treaty which merged the English and Welsh and the Scottish Parliament. So what we're looking to do is to have a Scottish voice within the world, and what Brexit's done, especially after we had our independence referendum in 2014, where the result, for those who don't know, was 55% to remain with the UK and 45% to go independent. Now, that demonstrates that that's a very lively discussion still. It was a clear majority. We accepted that, of course. We're all Democrats. But within the independence debate, the European question was absolutely fundamental, and it's fundamental to our proposition as an independent state. As I say, we want to join the world. We want to fit into our multilateral world and work out how we can best get the best future for our citizens. And for me, that is absolutely doing the same as Ireland does, as Denmark does, as Sweden does, as Finland does. There's an axis of Northern European small countries into which we will fit very comfortably. We're a social democratic, egalitarian country. We've got vast resources. We've got vast natural resources. We've got an educated population. We've got great universities. We've got so much going for us. But we're part of a United Kingdom that is not very united, as we've seen recently. And if you break the UK down into the four home nations, England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, it was only a 52% vote for Brexit of the population as a whole. But within each of the home nations, within Scotland, we had every single counting region voted 62% to remain. We had a very clear result. And obviously, the results were different in different regions, but we had overall a 62% result. In Northern Ireland, there was also a clear vote to remain, and that split on political lines within Northern Ireland. So there's a very sensitive position there. And within England and Wales, it was a very mixed picture. So the way that Mrs May has done this since is that in order to persuade her own party of her credentials, she had to persuade them that she's a born-again believer. She believes in Brexit. She wants to deliver Brexit. And they never had the intellectual discussion about what Brexit actually is. She won the Conservative leadership on the basis of Brexit means Brexit, which is a great slogan, but it doesn't actually move the debate on, and it doesn't help find a decision. And that's where the problem started. It is possible, of course, to leave the European Union. Now, from a Scottish perspective, we have Norway just over there, we've got Iceland just over there. There's ways of interacting with the EU that are different. But she's not done that. So she's delivered a deal that delivers exit. She's delivered the political declaration, which is the ancillary document to it, which tells us absolutely nothing in any reliable terms about the future. There's a series of warm aspirations, but what she's done by offering her own resignation in order to get the deal through her own party is that she's guaranteed she won't be around to honour any promises that are made about what the future might even be. So by seeking the extension that she sought, and she opened herself up to the European Council last week, which is where the dynamic really has changed, I think. She wanted a short extension to keep the pressure on to try and get her deal over the line. But the Council, I think very sensibly, and I think President Tusk has shown himself to be a real European statesman in all of this. He was instrumental in pushing a longer extension, which gives us time within the UK, within the English debate, which is where it needs to be fixed, to have a referendum on the European question. It also gives us time for the European elections, which I think is going to be a sparky contest. But I think the way the polls are at the UK in the moment, the Labour Party now doesn't have an incentive to find a form of words to get it over the line. So I think Jeremy Corbyn, much as he is himself very cool in the European Union, I think he was trying to find a way to make Brexit happen. I think he's now rather more enthusiastic about the prospect of a European election because he thinks his party will do well. Now, I don't think that's guaranteed, but I think it is clear that the Conservatives are going to do badly because they've got on the right of them, the anti-European side, they've got the new Nigel Farage Brexit Party and continuing UKIP. And on the right, the left of them, they've got a new party called Change UK, which is a group of Labour and Conservative MPs who, for various reasons, were leaving their own parties and have set up this new body. So there's a number of new parties coming into play, and I think there's a new dynamic in English politics and in the way that the 2014 independence referendum reorientated Scottish politics in favour of my party and the Greens, I have to say. What we're seeing in England is a settling out and a shifting of the political tectonic plates in a way that Westminster has proven it's incapable of reaching a consensus. So I think the logical thing to do is to push for either a revocation of Article 50 within the House of Commons, if they can find a majority for that, which I don't think they can anytime soon, or for another referendum to put it back to the people. So we're an anti-Brexit party. We are pro-independence, of course. The Scottish Greens, I have to say, are great allies of ours. We have a good cooperation with the Scottish Greens, who are also pro-independence. They also wouldn't necessarily call themselves nationalists, but they are in favour of an independent Scotland. So we have a lively dynamic within Scottish and indeed English, Welsh and Northern Irish politics at the moment. So I can well imagine that a number of our audience are very bored of Brexit. We are as well, but if we want to stop it, we need to go through this, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Alyn. That was already very interesting. I think mostly also because voices of Scottish independence don't get a lot of space in German media, one has to say, and listening to you is already interesting. But now, before I give the floor to Molly, I would like to say that this format, of course, is really about participation, and this is why it's much greater than all the Facebook lives and all this, because you can actually speak here like in a normal room. For this, you have to click on the hand button in the control panel which opened. I see already some people doing this. You are really brave. So, and I give you then one after the other the floor, and we try to discuss your remarks and questions. But now we are, of course, keen to listen to Molly, because Molly comes from the Greens in England and Wales. This is our partner party. You all even bet us in the number of Green members. We were so proud, always being the largest, and then you got more than us. This was really not normal. Of course,
it's the new normal.
Yeah, exactly. We are really pleased to have a strong partner in England and Wales, and now we are curious to listen to you, how you see the situation, and how big are the chances to get you back here, Molly? That's what interests Terry and me most.
Well, I won't speak loads because I'm also interested in hearing what other people have to say, but I would say that I think there are different kinds of Green parties across Europe, and there's a different kind of setting for Green parties across Europe. And I feel that in our culture, you know, there's an awful lot of commonality between the British Greens and the German Greens, actually. And I know you have your arguments about how radical you should be on the economy, and we probably have less of those, probably because we've not been so close to power. But generally, I would say in terms of the sort of, just, you know, the origin of our politics, I think it is very similar between Germans and Brits, and it's different with the Latin countries and also with France, actually. Anyway, leaving that aside, which is why we're good partners, I think. So why is this Brexit nightmare and psychodrama, this is the best word, why is it going on interminably? Well, I think there's two answers to that question. One answer is it's about Britain rethinking what it is. It's clearly our own personal psychodrama, so this is partly related to what Alyn said, but also, you know, what do we make of our colonial history? What do we do about the fact that we're no longer economically powerful? All of these questions come together in Brexit. So it's like a massive national self-exploration, and that type of thing does take a lot of time, and it's a shame that everybody else is having to be dragged into that. But on the more positive side, from a European point of view, it's demonstrating that people are refusing to give up on their European citizenship and their European rights and their place at the heart of Europe. And so why are we still here? Why are we still arguing about this? Well, because Alyn and me and Terry and Sven are not prepared to accept that the UK leaves the European Union. The easy thing would have been to say, okay, they won, we're out. But we didn't, because we know it's wrong. We know that the UK has to be in Europe, all four of us. And that's why you've supported us, and that's why Alyn and I have fought to stop this from happening, because we truly believe that it's the wrong thing to happen. And so, so to me, that's a positive thing, because we believe in the European Union, and we now have the strongest pro-European movement, as both at the rally. And you know, you see yellow and blue flags everywhere, and people suddenly realise the benefits of Europe. As Joni Mitchell said, you know, she has a song for Brexit. You don't know what it's got, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And this is the theme song for Brexit. But it hasn't gone. And we realise what we have, what we still have, and what we're trying to bring on to. Anyway, I just wanted to say that I think Greens right across Europe can be proud of the real leadership that's been shown by Caroline Lucas on this issue. And it's the first time in British politics that a Green leader in Westminster has shown such a leadership role. And the Scottish nationalists have been absolutely brilliant as well. I mean, Joanna Cherry, I think in particular, a lawyer like Alyn, I think I'm right in saying, you know, it's a time for lawyers really, and there's been some great performances. So I think the people we have in the Greens EFA group here have been leading the national debate, and that's been something that's made me really proud. And the only other thing I would say before we go to your fantastic webinar attendees and hear what they have to say, I think that there's a really important question at the heart of Brexit, but it's not. The question shouldn't be in or out of the European Union. The question should be, at which level is it appropriate to exercise different powers? So Brexit is a response to globalisation. It's a response to the sense that our politicians are no longer able to make our lives better. And that's because we have multinational corporations undermining national governments, as we see with our tax code. So what we should have asked is, what powers do we need in Scotland? What powers do we need, you know, in Devon, where I represent? What powers should be at the European level? What powers need to go up to the global level, like the powers to tackle climate change? And to me, that's an issue that we've just refused. We thought that somehow we can take back control, meaning we put all power in London and suddenly everything will be sorted out. But when all the power went to London, they couldn't deal with it. So we saw that was wrong, right? But that is an important question. It's a real question. It's a subsidiarity question. Yes. And I think we need to address that question head on. And it's totally agreement, because it's always been our politics to allow power to go down, as well as recognising when it has to go higher up.
Molly, before I give the floor to Terry and the audience, one thing I think in order to lay the ground, it's important to explain. So where do we stand now in Britain when it comes to the European elections? What is the Greens doing? What other actors are now doing? Are the lists of candidates being prepared? Where do you stand in practical terms?
Well, this is my life right now. I'm trying to prepare a campaign in no time, basically. So I thought that these European elections were coming. It's quite hard to believe that when your Prime Minister says, absolutely not, we will not have European elections. But I didn't believe her. So we've had a selection. I made sure that we had our selection because I didn't want to be not selected. And most of the other regions also then followed. So we've got a couple of regions finalising, but we are ahead of all the other parties in having our candidates selected. We were the people that believed that the European elections were coming. So this is a huge advantage, actually. But having said that, we sort of vaguely prepared, but we didn't do anything that would have been spending money until last Wednesday. And so basically in the past 6 days, we've had to organise a whole campaign. And so, yeah, something that took 18 months last time has had to be done in 6 days. There's a kind of upside to that, which is nobody argues. It's like, that has to be done, okay. So, you know, I remember meeting after meeting sort of saying, should this be our slogan, should we do, no, just do it, it's done, so, but anyway.
So what's your slogan?
So this really is your slogan, Greens Change Europe. It's a fantastic slogan.
Okay, and what about you? Where are you already selected, and is your campaign up and running, Alyn?
I'm not selected yet. The campaign is up and running. What we're doing, our national executive, Scotland has 6 seats within the Parliament, so we're putting together our list of 6. So our national executive is going to pick a gender balanced list of 3 men, 3 women, and then that will go to all of our members effectively to rank us number 1 to number 6 by a vote. So that'll be happening over the next week or so. And I've been approved as a candidate, so I'm hopeful I'll be taken on to the 6, and then I'm hopeful I'll be high enough on the list to see that I can continue. But we're good to go. We have a strong pro-European message. Our leader Nicola Sturgeon has been very clear on this from the start. We have a united party, as do the Greens, at a time when the Conservatives and Labour parties are so busy fighting themselves. I'm not sure they'll be busy fighting anybody else. So we're well advanced in the process, yes.
So before I give the floor to the audience, Terry, what do you make of this situation? You have been following Brexit. You were becoming an internet hero in Britain. I've seen your Christmas message. I was so it was incredible. But far beyond it, you were on the BBC and again and so on. So you were a bit the German green voice in Britain and also in Germany on the matter. What do you make of that situation?
Well, I think that Alyn and Molly have already laid out a lot of things that have happened in the past, and I think there are just 2 things that I might want to add. I think the first one is sometimes when we talk about Brexit, especially in Germany, but also in other EU member states, there's this certain level of arrogance that I could feel, you know, like this is happening in the UK because they have horrible tabloids, because they have this broken electoral system, because they never really understood the European Union in the first place. And all of these things are true, and I believe that there are reasons why Brexit happened, but at the same time, we have the groundwork and the preconditions and the problems that led to this Brexit referendum result, also in all other member states of the European Union. And I think there is no reason to be arrogant in Germany or in France or in any other member state and to believe that this could never happen with us. So I think the lesson that we have to learn is that we have to stop this before it actually gets that far, where there can be political majorities to basically have a campaign run completely on lies, and nobody really feels that they can stop this from happening. And that's the first thing that I think we all need to keep in mind when we look at Brexit. And the second thing, and this is really for me, the last week was very stressful and very emotional, to be honest, especially the night when the council meeting took place, because I actually didn't feel that it was super clear that there would be an extension granted. And because obviously Donald Tusk was very much pushing for that, but we know that Emmanuel Macron was much more hesitant, and also other heads of states who feel that in their societies, and this is something that we can also see in Germany, there is a growing level of frustration about what is happening in the UK. And I think that both Molly and Alyn have again and again also shown understanding for that. And I think we all feel it here too. We have, a Brexit debate, another Brexit debate, another Brexit debate, and there are still no majorities found in the House of Commons on what kind of Brexit the UK actually wants. And so I think with this backdrop, there was a little bit of a danger last week that the European heads of states would say, you know what, it has to be over now. We cannot let this get into the European elections. We cannot continue to have this mess with actually taking away space from the really important debates that we need to have in the European Union. And I think it's still something that is here present in the European Parliament also. But I felt that it was really a moment where European solidarity needed to be shown. And I think that solidarity is only really worth something when you show it in a moment where it's not suitable for you. And I have the feeling that really Donald Tusk was the person, alongside with parliamentarians here in the European Parliament, but also people from other member states, who pushed to say we cannot now, basically push them over the cliff. We need to have another extension, and we need to give the UK the chance to create enough political pressure to have another vote on this, to put it back to the people and to have another vote on Brexit. And for me, that this is happening now, that you are taking part in the European elections, and that there is a possibility, and I want to say this very clearly, there is a possibility that there is a second referendum in September or October. And I think that we have to support this growing pro-European movement in the UK and do everything we can so that they can make it happen, so that it can be put back to the people in the UK.
Thank you, Terry. So now, before I give the floor to some of the participants who have already used the hand signal to signal to us that they would like to speak, please note that this session will be recorded and available afterwards on the web. So if you speak, be aware that I will read your name and hopefully you will introduce yourself. So don't be surprised that you find yourself afterwards on YouTube. And beyond that, I'm delighted to see that it's really a beautiful mixture of British and German names, at least as far as I can see. And I start with the most exotic name, which is for a German at least, which is not McLaughlin. Yeah, thank you for helping with the pronunciation. And if you are belonging to any group, please tell us where you are from. So, Colin.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm from Scotland, and I support the SNP. I think that's what you asked.
Thank you. Welcome.
Well,
what do you want to share with us?
I'm just wondering. The reason why I've joined is because I'm trying to think. I posted a question through the question bank or whatever it's called, and I'm just wondering how Brexit affects me, being a 17-year-old.
Okay, thank you. I will give the floor to one or two more, and then we make a second round. So please note what Colin said. But one thing you didn't say: where in Scotland are you from?
I'm from Dumfries in Galloway.
Yes, I was there. Great, yeah, great area. Well, great to have you here. So, and then let's have someone who sounds rather German. Stephanie P. Let's see. Stephanie?
Yes, hello. Good evening. Thanks for the format and the content. Yeah, so actually my question also goes into the direction of the preparations in Scotland as well as the UK, Wales, Ireland now to the short term, yeah, obviously participation in the European, votings. And so yes, I would be interesting how did you prepare in advance also to to get your points done, and as especially for the Scottish part, we heard there is a strong European message prepared, so how you prepared yourself in this unsecure situation in advance.
Thank you, Stephanie. Where are you from?
I'm from Germany, near Kassel, so in a more area with little villages, I would call it like that.
Yeah, so I will greet Martin Häusling from you. Okay, all the best.
I will forward your regards.
Pleasure. So let's see what Emily Pearlstone has to say. Emily. Microphone not yet connected.
It's muted.
Hello?
Yes. Emily.
Hello, hi. So I'm in South Somerset in England, and my question's for Molly. What's her take on Julie Girling moving over to Change UK, and how will that affect the EU vote in the Southwest, do you think?
So now it's getting really complicated. Molly, you will have to explain all this to us. One last person I will try to ask whether. So Horst Peter. What? Nein. This is. Hallo Horst Peter. Deinen Rufnamen weißt du? Hallo.
Horst, ich bin der Horst. Hört mich? Ja, super. Super. Ich habe eine Frage. Und zwar, die englische Bevölkerung weiß doch nun über diese Folgen, auch die dramatischen Folgen wegen dem Brexit doch Bescheid. Auch Irland, Nordirland und die Schwächung von von Europa. Ja, und die Regierung ist ja relativ zerstritten und ich würde sagen unfähig zu entscheiden. Was steht eigentlich gegen ein neues Referendum? Warum ist es nicht von vornherein schon mal so weit gekommen? Und zweitens die Frage, was passiert in Großbritannien, wenn jetzt bei einem zweiten Referendum jetzt für ein Brexit gestimmt wird?
Okay, thank you. So, Alan, did you get it? I know your German is better than you pretend. It is very good.
Ich habe in Heidelberg studiert, also es ist ganz
okay.
Jetzt, aber ja, es reicht doch. Eigentlich reicht.
So, Horst, only, where are you from?
Also ich komme von Aachen und bin auch, ja.
Okay.
Ja, wir sind ja auch bald in Aachen zusammen, genau.
Absolut, da machen wir nämlich unseren Wahlkampfauftakt in NRW. Da sind wir nicht vor Ort, absolut. So,
richtig, am Sonntag.
Let's give the floor back. Perhaps Molly, this time.
Okay, I'll do the two last ones, shall I? So on Horst Peter's question, I mean, basically, I totally agree with you. Our government has become incapable. Our political system is completely broken. I'd like to say to other Europeans that every now and then, we hope it doesn't happen very often, your system goes into a complete political collapse. That's happened in the United Kingdom. And part of the reason that's happened to us in this way is that we have actually not had a war that we lost or a major crisis like that, which has required us to restructure our political system. That's actually quite unusual in Europe, isn't it? Most countries have had to. They've either had a revolution or a war or something like that. We haven't had that for hundreds of years. So we've just basically struggled along with an old-fashioned system, and we've never bothered to revise it. And it's just not working properly. It's not even really a proper democracy. So, for example, the way our democracy was made was sort of to appease the power of the landowners. That's why we still have landowners, a House of Landowners, the House of Lords. And we never sat down and thought, we'll write a constitution and we'll think about how power should be shared. And that's what Brexit gives us the opportunity to do. So as a Brit who's always been fed up with our political system, I'm seeing this as a really good opportunity to actually sit down and have a proper constitutional convention and think about how we should structure power in our country. So yes to a new referendum, but that's just the first stage of much greater constitutional reform. I've also looked quite closely into the way the first referendum worked, and there were significant problems there, illegality, not just deception, but foreign money funding, major scale kind of like disinformation. And the problem is we don't have the rules to protect ourselves against that. So even though we're saying we need people to vote, we can't be confident. Alan said in his speech today in the plenary that we need external observers, and it's a very good point. We can't rely on our own democracy. The rules are just not working.
Could you speak up? We are far away from the microphone.
Yeah,
I get the signal that this might be better.
And what if people vote for Brexit the second time? Well, I mean, it's the nature of a democratic decision that you don't know which way it's going to go. And so we will argue our best, and we will do our very best to persuade people. Clearly, they cannot be convinced by the same lies as last time around. They know that the German car makers aren't going to come and make everything okay for them. We hope they learn that. But the trouble is with the big lie system of propaganda, what people have heard first is what they hold on to. And so we've got an uphill struggle in making sure that we win that referendum. But anyway, so far we're ahead. We didn't leave on the 29th of March. We didn't leave on the 12th of April. We're still here. I'm wearing my green jacket. I'm fighting the European elections. So far, all good. And we're just going to do the same thing with the referendum. Now, I'm coming to Emily, because she's one of my voters. So she really matters to me in South Somerset. Emily, what Emily asked is about Julie Girling, who was a sort of classic Conservative politician, one of our MEPs here, one of 6 we have from South West England and Gibraltar, and she was pro-European. And eventually she refused to vote the way her government was voting, and she had the whip taken away from her, so she was effectively expelled from that party. Now, in the elections coming now, we have a lot of Conservative voters in South West England, and when they email me, I tell them I'm pro-EU, but I don't want to say to them, look, you should vote for me, because actually I don't stand for the policies they would support. And so they're looking for a home, and Julie Girling, to be truthful, is the correct representative for them. But how do we arrange that? Well, so we've got this new party that was registered, I think, yesterday, and it's called Change.uk. And that gives Julie a home and a place to stand. I'm a little bit nervous about that, because obviously a political party needs to have some experience and some structures and some internal due diligence, and Change.uk doesn't really have anything. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out in the elections, but I think Julie will stand for them in the Southwest, and there are a lot of people in the Southwest that may vote for her. So then we've got a question: how do people in the Southwest who just want to express their support for Remain in the elections, as if it was a sort of proxy for a referendum, how should they vote? And so there's massive interest on Twitter. Should you do a deal? Should these people stand down? And so on. At the moment, of the pro-Remain parties, which is Greens, Lib Dem, Change UK, I'm the only person with a seat. And so, you know, basically we cannot stand a joint slate, because we would have had to register as a joint party 2 weeks ago. That can't happen. My own view is that if we tried to negotiate now, it would break down the sort of agreement and good working that we have now, because who's going to agree to stand down for who? Yeah. I think it should be my seat, because I'm there. The Lib Dems will say they've got more support in the polls, it should be them. Julie will say, well, I've been here longer, it should be me. So if we actually sat down and had those discussions, it's inevitable that would lead to conflict. It would also take up energy and time, when what we have to do is campaign now to get the Remain voters voting. So what I say to people who think we should have this kind of arrangement is, please prioritise making sure people know there's an election, because the government won't do that, because they're going to lose this election big time. Secondly, making sure that it's clear which parties are supporting staying in the EU, and then making sure that people are registered to vote, particularly non-UK citizens. There were 3 million, I'm sure there are less now, but a lot of people who can vote in these elections don't even know they can vote. And make sure that young people register to vote, because they are also much more strongly pro-Remain than the average. And then make sure those people come out to vote, because turnout in European elections is low. I don't think it's ever been above 40%. So I think there's much less need to put an emphasis on kind of dealing between the parties, and much more energy should go into making people that support the European Union come out to vote.
Alyn?
Yeah, I'd go along with a lot of what Molly's saying there. I don't think there's going to be any electoral pacts between any of the parties in Scotland. I think what we might see is there will be a bit more coordination across certainly the spokespeople than we might have seen before in terms of combating fake news and that sort of stuff. But certainly there's no prospects of any pacts in Scotland. But I'd answer Colin's point about as a 17-year-old, what does Brexit mean for him? And Colin, I do really feel for you. I mean, I was able to, as a Scottish European, I was able to study abroad on the Erasmus programme. I spent a wonderful year at Heidelberg University, and if it hadn't been for the Erasmus grant, I wouldn't have gone. There's just no question I wouldn't have gone. The money would have been too much. Because of that, my life took a different turn. I'm quite sure it did. And I then went to do a master's at the College of Europe in Warsaw, which was even more exciting. I took advantage of the right to live, work, study anywhere across the European Union. I studied in France. I worked in Belgium. I was a rep on the Costa Brava for a while, and you'll never see that in any official biography, but I was able to take advantage of those rights. And
now, Alyn, watch out.
You'll never find the pictures. But that's one of the things that is really going to be one of the big losses for younger people, in that those rights are being taken away. The most socially progressive aspects of the EU, one of the most social mobility encouraging aspects of the EU, is that you can move around an entire continent. And that's going to be taken away. And yes, we can still move around, but you can still move around to go for a couple of weeks holiday or a weekend or up to 3 months. That's not long enough to go and really get to know a place and to live there and to work there. And it's just limiting your opportunities. And I think that's so sad. And it's being thrown away for nothing. And the reality is, many of the people who are promoting Brexit the hardest are making money out of Brexit, and they'll be fine, their kids will be fine, because they always are. People like that always And we're going to see an economic shock, which is going to limit your economic prospects. It's going to limit your prospects for a job. It's going to damage everybody's public services, because there'll be less money within the tax take and the tax system. So there really is, there's no good Brexit. And after 2 years of heartbreak, you'd have thought they'd have found the good reasons for Brexit by now, and they haven't. And it's not because Mrs. May's incompetent, though goodness me, she's made plenty of mistakes. It's because they made promises they knew could not be delivered. So it's going to limit your future options, Colin, and I'm really very sad about it. And that's where the sense of identity that we have within Scotland, as we are Scottish Europeans, and goodness me, plenty of people feel British as well. That's fine. That's a personal identity thing. But what you're losing as you lose your European citizenship is so much more, so important to your future prospects in the employment market and for us as a society. On Stephanie's point about how we're preparing, different parties will do this differently, Stephanie. I think Molly can speak for the Greens. I can speak for us in terms of how we're doing it. We're an established, serious political party. We've got a very professional, very big headquarters. We're putting a lot of stuff together. We're the government of Scotland. We're the third biggest bloc of members of the Westminster Parliament. This will be my 4th election that I've fought, so we know what we're doing. And what we needed to do, once it became clearer that the election's actually happening, and remember, it still might be cancelled. That's the absurdity of all of this. To put the manifesto together, and we do that on the basis of our track record, our existing policy. We need to select our candidates as well. And I, as an MEP, I've been starting to put the campaign diary together, where I get the best job. I get to travel the length and breadth of Scotland, all the cities, all the islands, all the mountains, everywhere. And I get to go and see it all, to go and meet the people who I'm encouraging to vote within the elections. So we're all putting that together just now. And yes, it'll be a very unusual campaign, but we're good for it. We're up for it because this matters.
No, I just wanted to say that what Alyn and me did is basically the reverse. So Alyn's from Scotland, he went to Germany with an Erasmus grant. I'm from Germany, and I went to study in Edinburgh with an Erasmus grant. And I can only second your point that without this support, I would have never done it. Like, it was so much easier for me to do this because of that. And I think for me, I would have never become an MEP, and I would have never taken the life decisions that I took without going on Erasmus to Scotland. And if I may add one point, because I think Colin obviously is in a special situation because he's a Scottish 17-year-old, but I would also add that even if you are a 17-year-old or 25 or 35 or 65-year-old person living in Germany with a German citizenship, you also have so much to lose. And that's not only the rights that Alyn was mentioning to live and work in the UK, but also that the European Union enables us to shape the 21st century in a way that no other member state can do alone, also not Germany, the biggest member state. So when we talk about, are we going to manage to tackle climate change? Are we going to be able to, set social standards in a globalized world? Are we going to, bring this democratic experiment, a democratic model of, liberal rule of law? Are we going to be able to defend that in this world? It's all dependent on the European Union. And I think all our rights are at stake. And this is also why I have always called for solidarity, because in the end, this is not going to be, we get rid of the Brits and then the problem is solved. Quite the opposite. I think if we lose this battle on Brexit, on this very, very crucial debate, I think it can have a negative effect on the whole rest of the European Union, and that's why it's so important also for the future, for 17 years old in the rest of the European Union, and to win this now, because not only the future of Europe, it's all our future.
Couldn't agree more. Exactly. I will read a few questions which were put in writing, and I still encourage you to lift your hand. Oh, now I see a lot of people did. I will come to you very soon, but now some written questions. So there's one from Kai Shutai, Green Greetings. He or she is saying, I'm not sure, already a comment to Molly. Please communicate better to the Remainers community that the Greens EFA are the biggest Remain party in the European Parliament. Brits should think Europe Leave FPTP mindset, whatever that is, you explain it, oh la 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 la, and stop bashing Greens as if we were a small party. Sorry for the long note, but recent Remain Twitter debate is worrisome. Then there's Christian Bernard. Could it be that in England, in particular, those who want to conduct undisturbed banking business, such as hedge funds, are driving the withdrawal from the EU? What are the true funders of the Brexit operators or operations? Are there any special personal economic interests? So that's a perfect question for Molly, I think. Then Marcus von Jordan. I wonder if there's any political force in the UK which actually fights for a second referendum. Wasn't that a good strategy for the election? And lastly, Regina Sties, if the Brexit doesn't take place, if there's another referendum, isn't there the danger that referendums in the future won't get accepted because people might say, well, why should we accept the result? They did not do it with Brexit. Why? We also want another referendum. So, a democracy question. So perhaps that time it's Alyn first. You're fine?
Yeah, happily. I'll start with Regina's, if I may. I think that's a really fair point, and it's one of the things that we've agonised in my party about our attitude to a second referendum, because obviously referendums are close to our heart in that that's how we want to achieve independence for Scotland. And in 2014, we had a referendum, and there was a number of differences between our independence referendum and the EU referendum, which were really very significant. What we would usually see in a referendum is that once there is a result, there's a movement towards the result and everybody accepts the result because everybody believes in democracy. So there's usually a move towards whatever the winning proposition was. We've not seen that in the Leave result, in that it was a very narrow result. The questions started coming almost immediately about the tactics the Leave campaign used, the promises that they made, the different ways in which if you wanted one particular set of issues, there was one campaign for you. If you wanted another one, there was another campaign. And they pretended to all be at war with each other, but they were carefully coordinated. Whereas in our independence referendum, we had a 650-page prospectus, a 650-page manifesto about, we told the people of Scotland, this is what we want to achieve. Yes. We also made sure that EU nationals were able to vote within our referendum, because our definition of Scottish is, do you live in Scotland? So we opened up the voting franchise to everybody. Within the UK referendum, and I've spoken to Leave politicians about this, they deliberately did not put a prospectus to the people. So they promised everything you like. Yes. They promised to cut red tape. They promised more money for the National Health Service. They promised everything you like you'll be able to keep. They promised fantasy trade deals that would be ready within minutes of the Leave vote happening. Liam Fox, David Davis, Michael Gove, Boris Johnson, they all made promises that they knew, we now knew, that those promises that they made, they knew at the time were not capable of delivery. And people are entitled to believe their politicians, but when you see, I know Germany has these programs too, that when you see the little old lady who has been conned by some bad guy, you don't say to the little old lady, well, oh, you were silly. You say to the bad guy, you were the bad guy. That's what's happened within the UK, and the Leave vote was a cry for help. It was a cry for help from a broken political system that has left lots of people feeling marginalised, cut out from power. The first past the post electoral system, which is where within the constituency, only the person who gets the most votes wins, everybody else doesn't get elected. That has left a lot of people misrepresented within the UK system. So we've not seen a drift towards the Leave result. We've seen a lot of people feeling very aggrieved about the tactics of the Leave campaign and the way that it was done. So democracy matters. Democracy absolutely matters. But that's where I think it is perfectly legitimate, given, as I say, 2 of the 4 home nations of the UK voted to remain, and we've been ignored ever since. The situation in Northern Ireland is so serious, we need to consider this very, very carefully. The result itself was only 52 to 48. after a campaign that broke electoral law on campaign finance, broke electoral law in terms of data protection, broke electoral law in terms of coordination, and made promises that they couldn't keep. So I think it is perfectly legitimate in this case, and I'm wary about second referendums, but in this case, I think it is perfectly legitimate to take Mrs. May's deal and say, okay, this is Brexit. We now know what Brexit is. Let's have a confirmatory vote of the UK on that. And I think that would allow us to have the discussion based on facts rather than empty promises, which after 2 years we've been able to see really weren't actually capable of delivering. So it's a very good point, and you're right. I don't believe you can have referendums every day of the week. But of course, from a Scottish perspective, circumstances have changed, which is why independence for us is back on the table. Because if it's the only way out of this mess for us, we will do our best to turn Brexit round for the whole of the UK, for our English, our Welsh, our Northern Irish friends. But if we're not able to do that, then we reserve the rights to make our own decisions, and that would necessitate a second referendum for Scotland, because things have changed. So it's a very dynamic situation at the moment. The point about the bankers and the hedge funds, you're absolutely right. It is proven, and Molly's done a lot of work on this, it's proven that there were a number of people made money out of currency fluctuations in the immediate aftermath of the Brexit vote. And that's where a lot of this has been going to. We've seen a lot of dark money within the UK's political system. We've seen a lot of phony think tanks that pretend to be impartial think tanks, but they're not. And they get put onto the BBC very, very regularly to put a particular agenda. So the role of these organisations within our democracy is really very concerning. And as I say, I think the people who are most keen on promoting Brexit are those who are actually personally making money out of it.
Shall I carry on that? Yeah,
please.
So the work Alan's talking about is two websites. One's called the Bad Boys of Brexit, and the second one is called the Brexit Syndicate. And the Bad Boys looks at who was driving Brexit and what their personal selfish motivations were. And there are three types: the regulation burners, as I called them, people who just want to get rid of legal protections on workers' rights or the environment and so on, climate change deniers as well. Then the second group are the finance people. So the people, as you said, who either don't like the tax law that Sven and I have introduced, so rich people have to pay their taxes. And then on the other hand, we've got the hedge funds, as you pointed out. So on the night of the Brexit referendum, one of the bad boys, whose name is Chris Finodi, made £200 million just by gambling against the pound. The pound was high because people thought Remain would win. After the result came in, it collapsed. He shorted the pound. He made £200 million just on that one night. He's now taken a position of, I think, £500 million against British companies on the basis that Brexit will go ahead. I hope he's already losing money. I hope we will make sure he loses a lot. Anyway, the third group was the Russian connection, which is also worth considering because Putin was a key player in the referendum. We still don't know where Arron Banks' money came. The biggest political donation of all time, £7 million to the Leave campaign, to Leave.eu, and the suspicion is that that money is actually Russian money. Anyway, we're not able to prove that, but there's a lot of connections between Brexit people and Russian interests, Russian oil money, Russian oligarchs, and so on. So all of that's on the Bad Boys of Brexit website, and you can investigate further. Unfortunately, quite a lot of these bad boys live in southwest England, so I am their MEP, which isn't Arron Banks. I'm Arron Banks' MEP, and Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Liam Fox. I've got a whole collection of these guys. Anyway, so the other two questions I can answer quite briefly. Marcus said, wouldn't it be a good idea to campaign on the basis of a people's vote? And I think that will start to become part of the European election campaign in Britain. And the way I imagine it's going to look is that the pro-Remain organisations like Britain for Europe and so on will draw up a pledge, and it will ask you to say, yes, I support a new referendum, yes, I support revoking Article 50 if it looks like no deal might happen, 2 or 3 pledges, and then they can advertise to their members who has signed up for this pledge. And I think that would be a good thing for them to get organised. In contrast to what I think Kai was talking about, which is this sort of endless attempt on Twitter. Probably, I don't know where it's coming from. I had this from a Lib Dem today, sort of saying, why don't you stand aside for us, when actually we have 3 MEPs and they have 1. And I think what you were suggesting, which is that the Green Party isn't treated as a powerful force in Britain, is largely because we're just denied media time so much that then people think, oh, well, you don't matter, you can clear out of the way. But actually in European elections, because they're proportional elections, we have mattered and we do matter, and we certainly will not be standing down for other parties. I mean, you know, I think we need to discuss how we can make sure that the elections work for Remain, and we should cooperate as people who support staying in the EU. But I mean, I think just coming under pressure from people who say, well, because you stood aside in the first past the post general election, which is because the Greens did that, that's why May didn't have her majority, that's why we're in this position, because if May had won that election, if we hadn't helped certain Labour people and Lib Dems to win their seats, then we wouldn't even be here. We would have left the EU because she would have had enough of a majority to make that happen. So to me, that was the Greens putting party before country. But when it comes to an election where we already have MEPs, then you know, we have to continue to stand and defend those seats, I believe. And as I said previously, I don't think this dealing at this late stage will achieve anything other than creating more conflict. So there's positive things we can do to cooperate the parties that support Remain, and I'll certainly be coordinating that. But a joint list isn't legally possible, and I think standing down for each other is just not feasible in this time frame.
Thank you. There are some more people who have pointed up here, so I'll start with Christoph Rückert. Christoph? Oh. Your microphone is not possible to unmute. Bizarre, never seen. Sorry about this, so there's nothing I can do about this. Ah, now he's very strange. So now Dirk, and you have a really difficult name. Buenas. Dirk, are you with us?
Yes, hello.
Ah, hi Dirk. Where are you from?
Hello, I'm from Germany, from Pforzheim, next to Karlsruhe. And I have the question, do you think the second referendum, there will be a different decision as the first referendum? And why should the people of Great Britain on the second referendum decide different?
Thank you. Straightforward question. So then I have Emily. Yes, but Emma Hansen. So now I'm curious. This Emma is much more common in Britain than in Germany, but Hansen sounds very German. So hi, Emma.
Hi, I'm actually a German citizen living in North London, and that's what my question relates to. Is because I'm wondering whether in the upcoming European elections I should use my German vote to vote for somebody who will actually represent me for the next 5 years, or whether I should use my British vote and risk wasting it on somebody who's only going to be in the European Parliament for a couple of months.
Shall we have a fight now for your vote? I would say it depends whom you want to vote for. If you want to vote for the Greens, it would be worth a fight. Otherwise, anyway, thanks, Emma, and we will listen to Christian.
Liam McClellan. Oh, I know Liam McClellan. He's a Green in London.
Okay, so Molly has a special wish here. Liam McClellan. Oh, that is really
Liam
difficult as well. Yeah, please, I spare the surname. Liam.
No, not a problem, don't worry. Hi, so I'm Liam. I'm the co-chair of the Young Greens, which is the youth and student branch of the Green Party of England and Wales. I've recently been a guest at the German Young Greens Federal Congress in Leipzig a couple of weekends ago. So I live in Nottinghamshire, in which one of the towns, Mansfield, voted 70.9% to leave. Derby, which is my home city, and in the Midlands has already lost 4,000 jobs due to Brexit, with the Midlands being the worst hit region in the UK, with an estimated 22,000 jobs lost since the Brexit vote. My cousin works for Toyota in Derby. Like me, she is a member of the LGBTIQ community, but unlike me, she is standing for UKIP in the local elections. For me, remaining in the EU and campaigning for Remain needs to highlight the positives of Europe. So many people believe that they were going to have a better life if they voted to leave. So how important is it for the Greens to campaign on social justice issues over climate and ecology issues to win a people's vote?
Great, and greetings to the Midlands, because I have a similar history than Terry, but I did my 1 year in Britain in Birmingham, which is not quite Derby, but at least it's Midlands. So anyway, and I'm just yes. So there's Susanne Weiss. Susanne, be prepared. Hello.
Yeah.
Susanne.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Where are you from?
I'm from Munich, and my question is, I'm also a Green Party member since a long time, and my question would be, what can we do here in Germany in this, if there should be a second referendum? Me and some of my neighbors, we started a website. It says we say hello UK, where we try to make people send postcards, friendly postcards to the UK, saying how much we like them and appreciate their culture. And but I think the campaign, even if we got some press coverage and so, didn't really take off. So that was one of the things we tried. So what else could we do to support?
Perhaps we can do a bit in order to boost your advert. So I think Terry and myself, we can try to help it a bit. Now we are moving really to a 4-country summit. So we have Bavaria, North Rhine-Westphalia, Scotland, and England. So that is really getting really multicultural here. So now last person who has pointed up here is Uwe Sonnenschein. So do you get Sonnenschein? Sunshine, a really great name. So Uwe.
How do you say that? I said that, didn't I?
Uwe, so far your microphone does not seem to work.
Yes, now is it working?
Uwe, yeah. Hi.
Thank you for the nice introduction of my name. Yes, I have a question. Why do you think that the British people will know the advantage of Europe? Because now you all of what you have said, you studied already in a different country, so you had the chance to see the advantage. But if I see or if I look at the other British people, they mainly had not the chance to see all the advantage. And the question is, why do you think that they will see the advantage and will vote in a different way if there will be a second election?
Yes, so I give the floor directly to Molly.
Yeah, just to say, I mean, apart from all the shenanigans and the illegality and everything we've talked about with the referendum, we are living in a country where we've had 30 years of anti-European propaganda. We have an absolutely terrible media system. The BBC now is no longer independent on this issue. And so people don't really understand. I'm sure this is true in all European countries, but I think it's the worst in Britain. That, you know, we have media moguls and wealthy people feeding lies out all the time through media, and people don't understand the benefits of Europe. And we do our very best to share that, and we did that in the referendum campaign. But we're basically fighting back against 30 years of bad propaganda. But the thing is, people are incredibly well informed now because they've been arguing and thinking, and you see all the time on Twitter and social media and people in conversations. But so the first time the lies came around, somebody says, oh, we can just have access to all the fish in the world, you know, and then we'll just be allowed to sell those in European markets. And the first time people hear that, they think, that sounds good. But now, over 2-3 years, you know, people have argued fish backwards and forwards and thrown fish in the river and, you know, visited other fishermen, and fishermen have been interviewed on the TV. And I think there's still not an understanding of how this works, but there's more understanding now. And so a lot of the lies have unraveled, and I think that is going to help. But the other thing that's really important to say is that actually younger people totally do appreciate the benefits of being European citizens, and they do see why Europe works for them. And so every year that passes, it's easier to win a referendum, and if we can keep Britain in Europe, then we will become a much stronger, better member of the European Union than we were previously, when we had people who were sort of harking back to the 1950s and some fantasy time when Britain was really powerful and didn't need its European neighbours, when Britain stood alone, that wartime myth that we had, which was actually really important at the time, but is doing us a serious disservice now. So yes, but I think we also have to remember young people in places like Derby that Liam was talking about, where they don't see any of these opportunities and where they've just been at the bad end of terrible conservative government policies for 30 years. No regional policy, industry closing down, nothing to replace it, poor quality jobs or no jobs. The result of those policies is people feel there's just nothing for them to lose. That's what people were saying when they voted to leave the European Union. I've just got nothing to lose. Sadly, they were wrong about that because, they've now lost their jobs, as you pointed out. They've got their civil rights, their democratic rights under threat. But nonetheless, this is why when I was speaking in the Parliament today, I said we have to be tough on Brexit and tough on the causes of Brexit, because we cannot just carry on the way we were, and Greens obviously have a policy for that. We suggest the Green New Deal to bring jobs back to areas just like Derby. So I think that puts us in a very strong position to argue to stay in the European Union, but not to change Britain. The main changes that need to happen need to take place in Britain, I believe, and people were voting against their lives, saying something's terrible. They just chose the wrong target, and they partly chose that target because the person representing that target was David Cameron, who was the Conservative Prime Minister who was causing them all the problems. So yes, I completely agree with what Liam said about the need to stress the positives of Europe, but I think we also need to be very clear that we understand how difficult people's lives are, and staying in Europe is not a panacea. It's just something that, it's just that if we leave Europe, their lives would be much harder and it will be more difficult to solve the problems that people are living with. Emily, I'm going to get your vote now. Before the end of this, you'll be voting in Britain. No, just to say to Emily, Emma, sorry, it was Emily earlier on, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, that's not a good way to win somebody's vote, is it, getting their name wrong? We all know that. Emma, in London. I've had quite a few people asking me this on Twitter, and look, this is what I would say in response to you. Britain is at a historic crisis at the moment, and I really want us to stay in the European Union, and I think you do too. And so a positive vote for Remain, a Remain party in this election, gives that indication that we're a Remain country and we want to stay, and it makes the people's vote much more likely to happen. So to me, that's a more important vote this time than voting in Germany for somebody who will admittedly definitely be here for 5 years. But look, if you vote strongly to Remain and we get the people's vote and we work together and we win that, then we will be here for 5 years anyway. So I think that's the more important way to use your vote. Convinced? Are you convinced?
Alyn, please. Oh, Alyn, we can't hear you.
Oh, I was muted and I didn't even realise. Goodness.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, now it's good.
It's amazing they let me in charge of a laptop. That's amazing. We don't stand candidates in London, so I can be neutral in this question. Emma, the opportunity that we have to really send a message with this European election is that, bluntly, in brass tacks, if the Remain parties do better than the Leave parties, then I think a second referendum is inevitable. If the Leave parties do better than the Remain parties, then I think Mrs May's deal is inevitable. And I think that's where it'll be. And if we want to find a way out of this, then we need either the MPs can revoke Article 50 in the House of Commons. I don't see that happening yet. It could happen, but it is possible. Or a second referendum, which would allow a confirmatory vote on Mrs May's deal, now that we know what Brexit is. So if you're looking to influence that process, you've got a vote in which you'll be able to say something about that. And that would be my plea for that. And obviously, if you want to vote in Germany, that's your right to, because in the European Union, you've got these amazing rights where you can do that sort of stuff. On Dirk's point about why we think there would be a different result, it's a variety of things. It's partly demographics, in that a number of people have seen what it actually means to them, but also consequences in terms of the promises of the Leave campaign have now been exposed as either hopelessly idealistic or downright reckless or downright lies. So we've had 2 years to find the positive case for Brexit, and it hasn't been found. We've seen the real world economic consequences. We've seen a lot of the promises being exposed as being fictitious. we're also seeing the consequences in people's pockets. The UK is 20% worse off because sterling has slid and stayed slid since the EU referendum. So that makes every single one of us poorer. That makes inflation higher. And we're going to see those economic consequences before Brexit's even happened. So I think there is Mrs May's deal versus Remain. I think we have a much more fact-based argument after the last 2 years. We have a much more fact-based argument, given that Mrs May's deal actually sets out in black and white the reality of the exit, and everything else in the future is in the conditional tense. So I think there's an argument to be won there, and I do think we could win it.
Well, thank you. So Molly signaled to me she has to leave. She has a really good excuse, though. She has to prepare and win a campaign. For reasons of politeness, I will not now argue about Emma's vote. Yeah, so I leave you with the last vote. Although I take personal that you got support from Scotland on this. So I would really to share one thing. I felt a real sense of togetherness in this exchange. So I couldn't make a big difference in the approach how we discussed Europe between those who come from the British Isles and us coming from the different parts of Germany. So this is really Europe, and that is really was a great and fruitful exchange. And I can only say it's the first time that we had such an atmosphere in this format. Also, the ones I did in English, or in what I regard as English, they never had that atmosphere. And this proves to me true what you were saying. British and, German Greens, we are really having a different approach to things. And I could feel this here, and I think it shouldn't be the last encounter of that kind. Molly, we wish you all the best for your campaign, and I want to have you back. We want to have you back.
Thank you, and Alyn as well.
Of course. Alyn, I don't say goodbye now because we have more questions. Okay. So if you wanted to say goodbye, the thanks to Alyn comes later. Thank you, Molly.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.
So, I have a number of really interesting written questions, and then we should. I see a few more who want to speak. I will give them the floor as well. Also, some friends from the British Isles. But I will move now first to written questions. So first, there is Philip T. Question to all. Was there an ignorance regarding a soft Brexit in the first referendum? Wouldn't a second referendum make sense to clarify the how? What majority is needed and which parties are in favor? So this is clearly to Alyn. Then we have a question from Iris Eckhoff. Workplaces for Europeans that will happen after Brexit, will there be a close border? Is a bit rusty English. People are in anger that they have to leave after Brexit, and the students can that they can go on to study. I have to ask my staff to try to make that a bit more readable. I have difficulties understanding. I show it to Terry, perhaps she can make more sense of it. Christian Bernard, what chances exist to mobilize the youth in the UK more strongly, their vote for a new referendum to inspire and bring the ideas on the street? So the question about young people. Then we have Marta, yet now it's getting really difficult. Jakiniuk Lloyd, this was a Polish part of the name. I'm Polish living in Britain, and I feel betrayed by the Brexit decision. I hope for the second referendum, but we mustn't all believe that the people who voted Brexit the first time will magically change their mind because we are right. We haven't convinced them, and they had 3 years to harden their position already. Yes. We need to educate the whole country on what are the benefits of being part of the EU and what are we going to lose, and it is not a project fear. There is so much we, the UK, have already lost, and it is not just our world credibility. And lastly, Gerhard Lohmann-Bond, will someone please mention that the referendum result would have been annulled if it had been binding rather than merely advisory? So, Alyn, there are questions for you, but I think there were also, from the last time round, questions which are tailor-made for you, for instance, on the social side.
Can I just, because
please.
of the last question, can
Yes.
I just say that recently in Switzerland, after there was a referendum, and because there had been apparently misgivings in the way that one of the sides had informed the electorate, it has to be redone. So there seem to be apparently countries that are really knowledgeable about how to do referendums that do these kind of things, like annul referendums.
Yeah. Well, starting with Philip's question about the ignorance of a soft Brexit, there was ignorance of Brexit full stop. There was, and that was a deliberate tactic of the Leave campaign. They promised that basically life would stay the same, but you'd be able to get rid of red tape, you'd be able to somehow get £350 million a week for the National Health Service. They promised things that they knew could not be delivered. So in terms of a second referendum, we now have Mrs May's deal, so we now see what Brexit is. We've also had 2 years of experience of those tactics and those promises being debunked. So I think there is a new dynamic on that. In terms of which parties, the Green Party obviously is in favour of a second referendum. My party as well is in Scotland, as are Sinn Féin within Northern Ireland, Plaid Cymru within Wales. The Liberals UK-wide are also in favour of a referendum. And the big question I have to say is, where are the Tories going to be on this, and where is Labour going to be on this? I know, because I have friends in both parties, that there are people within each of those parties who are mobilising for a referendum, but it is not their party's policy. And this is where the European election is going to be so interesting, in that it's easy for us to write the National Party's manifesto because we have a united party and a clear position. The Conservatives and Labour parties are going to struggle to come up with a unified position for this election. So I think there's a real argument to be won there, and in terms of where that's going to get to, it's an open question. The question about the situation in Ireland is really serious. It's the peace process in Northern Ireland is still very fragile. Now, I'm from Glasgow originally. I spend a lot of time back and forth to Belfast. I know the place well. And the benefits of peace are visible on the street. I remember, I'm 45 years old. I don't count myself as a grand old man, but I remember the bad times in Belfast. I remember bombs going off in Manchester, in London as well. I remember what could happen if things slide back, and we must be so careful that things don't slide back. And anything that alters the border across the island of Ireland, and Brexit will do that if it happens in the way that it's proposed to. If anything arranges that border, it's going to be really, really negative for a fragile peace process, and we need to be very sensitive to that. Marta, thanks for your question, and I'm so sorry you feel that way, and I can understand why. I myself, as I said, studied in Warsaw, had a great time in your lovely country, and I'm sad that you're feeling the way you're feeling, and this was one of the things that we warned about from my party's perspective as the referendum was first being brought forward. Remember, I said that in the Scottish independence referendum, we had a franchise that said all EU nationals have a vote. We're legislating right now that we're going to change voting rights in Scotland away from citizenship to residence, so that anyone who lives in Scotland will be able to take part in our democratic process, because I think that's really important for a feeling of belonging and a feeling of inclusion. We proposed these amendments to change this in the EU referendum in the House of Commons as the legislation was going through. We wanted to see all EU nationals have a vote, and it was dismissed by the Conservatives because what they wanted to do was to have a debate about your position in our society that would exclude you from it because, well, you're not one of us, are you?
Yes.
It was a terrible, terrible decision that the Conservatives made, and I blame David Cameron personally, and I hope he doesn't sleep at night, because I'm not sleeping much at night because of all of this stuff. And what he's done is empower the bad guys who are trying to seek division within our society, who are trying to set people neighbour against neighbour, and it's terribly, terribly dangerous. And you're right, what we need to do is not project fear. We need to explain to people the reality our European connections. The reality that immigration is a great thing for the UK. It's been a great thing for Scotland. If you want a statistic, net into the UK exchequer, £55 every second is generated by EU nationals within the UK by economic activity. EU nationals in the UK take far less out in social services than other people do. So all the economics are very clear, but a perception was allowed to build up that immigration was somehow a problem, and it's not. The problem is austerity. The problem is that the Conservative Party has, for the best part of 10 years, defunded public services, has allowed a broken housing market to continue. If you're a young person in England, you're just going to struggle to get a house. That's the reality of where things are. And the resentment has built up and built up and built up. And then precisely the people who made these decisions tried to blame EU nationals for them. And the Leave campaign, I was very struck by Liam's point earlier that people voted Leave for a better life. They did, and we must engage with that on that basis, that a lot of people thought that the promises that they were made could be taken seriously, and they're entitled to do that. So we need to educate people. We produced in Scotland, and it's a very good document I'm very proud of, Scotland in Europe. It's a website, www.scotlandineurope.eu, and we took all the EU stuff and made it accessible to people. Because a lot of the EU communication is either really, really, really niche specialist stuff, or can you find Italy on a map? There's not really much in between. And we have, as Molly said, the corrosive media culture that we do within Scotland, within the UK, about this sort of stuff. So we need to cut through that noise. But I do think we have advantages within a prospective EU referendum, that we have one of the most energised pro-EU campaigns of any EU member state. I think there's a real asset in terms of taking that campaign forward. I think there's a degree of cross-party working that we can do on that sort of point. We've also seen, as I say, 2 years worth of people trying to find the upside to Brexit and realising that actually there isn't one. So I think there's a real argument to be won there, but I really do hope that you feel safe in our society, because that's so important.
Kelly, do you want to come in?
I wanted to add one point on the social justice question, because I completely agree with Liam that we have to, also from the European level, tackle that more. And I think what Alyn now said, that the problem in the UK for a lot of people was not EU, the EU imposing anything, but it was the austerity that the Tory government had imposed over years. But at the same time, I also think that there is a lesson learned for the European Union. And I think that in the past years, we have done too little to make sure that inequality is not rising, but decreasing. And ironically, one of the things that I have been working on a lot in the past years in the European Parliament was the Posting of Workers Directive. And actually, posted workers had in many member states been misused, or this Posting of Workers Directive, in order to do wage dumping, basically, or to undermine collective agreements. This had been the case in Germany a lot. And interestingly, while the Brexit process was unraveling, and while the first discussions were happening, we were discussing on revising the Posting of Workers Directive, so making it much more safeguard against having social dumping and against having this undermining of collective agreements. So interestingly, a lot of arguments that were made, for example, by people on the left side of the political spectrum in favor of Brexit, I think are things that if you work inside of the European Union, if you come here to the European Parliament, or if the British government had an interest in changing that, you can change them. And in fact, we have to change them. I think we have to fight for making the European Union more socially just. But that's something that I think all Green parties all over Europe share and really want to make a priority also for the European election, alongside with obviously the struggle against climate change and for more democracy. And I think it's really at the core of what we want as Greens, the European Union to do better in, because we see that there are shortcomings in the way that this is happening right now.
Okay, I would like to give now the floor to those who used the hand button and didn't speak yet. So, and then slowly getting to a final.
Because I just wanted to say that it's not only Molly who has to win a campaign, we all have to win campaigns.
True, but not necessarily tonight. Of course, this is part of our campaigning preparation. So so I start with Alyn Win. So this is impossible for German. I leave it like this. So hi, and you can speak now. Not yet, because the microphone is not working yet. Ah, now, please. We can't hear you. Should work now, but it doesn't. Try to figure out what's wrong. Oh, no, you disappeared. No. Ah, you are back. Ayun?
Turn it up. I think there is a sound, but it's very, very low.
Now, please. Try to speak. Okay, I'll let you try to figure it out and give the floor to Nadine Milde, who's also a German candidate for the next European elections. Nadine, hi, but your microphone is not yet. Now it should work.
Now it should work. Hi, you guys. Actually, I had a question for Molly, but maybe you can answer it as well. Molly joked earlier that one of the positive aspects of this entire Brexit crisis was that debates and fights within the party had stopped because it's all hands on deck now. I was just wondering to what extent you're positive that the same effect does not happen in the Brexit debates that are coming up, in the sense that we will have actual debates on what kind of EU we want, the necessary changes that you mentioned, and that people won't feel compelled to just hush the criticism and sing the praises of the EU without any questions and debates.
Yes, and before I give the floor back to Alyn, I would like to read you one consideration which arrived in writing, and this is from Oliver Jungklaus. Hello to the round. I'm not sure whether this is perfect English. You can tell us afterwards. The EU and Theresa May have now agreed the 31st October 2019 for the withdrawal of Great Britain from the UK, from the EU. However, I'm concerned that shortly before the deadline, 31st of October, May, the EU could again ask for a postponement if no agreement is in sight. Or will May definitely be able definitely be able to comply with the 31st of October this time? How do you rate Theresa May? Of course, I would prefer if Great Britain stayed in the EU, but this postponement is unbearable for the British. What comes next? Brexit, yes or no? Especially for the British who wanted to stay in the EU. So, please, Alyn first.
Sure. Well, Nadine's point about what sort of Europe do we want to see? Well, I suspect that discussion is going to be different in different places. Certainly from our side, and we've had these discussions within the Parliament as well. We often take the benefits of the EU for granted, and that's not where a lot of people out there in the real world are. A lot of people are struggling in their daily lives, they're struggling in their jobs, the effects of climate change, the effects of automation, the effects of the gig economy, the effects of austerity. There's a lot of people feeling anxious, and they're vulnerable to the sort of populism that says, you're right, blame the immigrants, blame the EU, blame somebody else. And that's a dangerous moment. So certainly from our side, what our campaign is going to be about is defending international solidarity in action. And that's what the EU is. We live in a complicated multilateral world where we've got Putin to the east and we've got Trump to the west. And there's 500 million of us who might be able to tackle the challenges that are facing us together rather than separately. And it's one of the things that I've said to a number of the parties within the Parliament, that yes, we all have different views of what sort of EU we want to see in the future. Now, and my party's view is very clear. We want to be part of it, and we want to help it into a confederal system where power sits in different places, and that's all democratically overseen. But one of the examples, the example that happened most recently, TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Protocol, which had a number of things wrong with it, a lot of things wrong with it, and quite rightly, we attacked it because it wasn't good enough. But be careful of the way that we say that. The reason why we were able to defeat TTIP was because everybody is represented as citizens by the European Parliament. So we had a strong voice to say, this isn't good enough. But some of the language that was used in that actually strengthened the anti-Europeans, because it said TTIP's been a secret deal done by lobbyists, it's been a secret deal done for the bankers, it's been a secret deal that's totally anti-democratic, when actually, no, it wasn't. So it allowed the anti-Europeans a stick to beat us with. And I've been struck by the phrase often over the last while that this is why the anti-Europeans have such an easy job, because we're disagreeing over the reality of the minutiae of the shades of grey of life. Well, they just need to say everything's bad and it's rubbish. And they have a very easy job with that. And sometimes we can be presented as we're arguing about the colour of the curtains while actually the roof's on fire. And certainly it's been a wake-up call for me that we need to defend the benefits of international solidarity. We need to explain the EU and stop the, oh, well, the EU's great, but we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do that. Because actually what a lot of people hear is the EU's not that good. And the EU is an amazing project that we are all privileged to be part of. It makes all of our lives better in so many ways on a daily basis, and we need to explain that to people because a lot of those benefits are being taken for granted, which is a sign of the EU's success in some ways, but it is also a massive vulnerability in that people can present the downsides of the EU as the biggest problem ever. On Oliver's point about the 31st of October, I'm starting to feel that I should get T-shirts made. You know, I survived the 29th of March, I survived the 12th of April, and I look forward to surviving the 31st of October as well. Mrs. May, and I respect her determination, if little else. She really does want to get this done. She believes that it's an important project. I disagree entirely with that, but she said absolutely categorically there wasn't going to be a UK general election, and there was. She said absolutely categorically we'd leave on the 29th of March, and we didn't. She said absolutely categorically the 12th of April was the end point, and it isn't. So I think we can turn this round, and I think the European elections give us a chance to get a solid pro-Remain vote, which will change the weather at Westminster, either towards revocation directly or towards a second referendum. If there's a second referendum, we are going to need to work like we've never worked before across the UK, working with the parties, working together where we can. Now, obviously, the campaigns will be different in each of the countries. In Scotland, we have a very different argument about the EU than in England, for example. But there's things where we need to support each other because it really is in the interests of all parts of the UK. And I remain thoroughly in favour of Scottish independence. I think our best future is an independent state within the EU. But I don't want to see our friends in England and Wales and Northern Ireland have a bad time. And that's what Brexit's going to guarantee if it is nodded through in Mrs. May's deal with absolutely no details about the future. So I think it is very likely that the date could slide. And I think, frankly, that's a good thing. So I appreciate that's frustrating from other perspectives, that you want to get clarity and get on with your life and stop talking about our nonsense. But if you want to keep us in, I'm afraid we need to go through this.
I just have 3 points. I think, first of all, I, at the moment, don't see that there's going to be another extension after the 31st of October, if there is not going to be movement. If there is just going to be additional discussion more and more, and no sign of having a people's vote, I think it's going to be very hard to have the European Council again agree unanimously to have another extension. So I think it's really this, we need to make it happen before the 31st of October. The second point is that I'd agree that, yes, we need to show the advantages of the European Union, but I think that the challenge that we are facing now in the rest of the European Union, with the UK participating in the European elections, can mean that we will have a very strong debate between European unity versus Brexit, and anti-Europeans. And I think there is a danger in just showing these two alternatives. So either you vote for the anti-Europeans or you vote for the status quo. And I think as Greens, what we have to make sure, and this is really the task also for us as candidates, is that we show that there are other alternatives, that you can be absolutely pro-European, pro-EU, but you still want to see things change in the European Union. And that will be, I think, our task as candidates to make that happen in the democratic parties, to bring across that message to the people in this campaign. I know it's challenging, and I know sometimes it's difficult, but I think it's possible, and I think that we should do this. And the third point I wanted to make, I forgot. I think it's just too late. Maybe to excuse myself, I have been awake since 6:15. And Alyn was just saying beforehand that being in the European Parliament the whole day, your brain at some point just gets blurry because the air in here is actually really bad. So excuse my forgetfulness after a very long day of work.
Well, first I would like to thank Molly, even in her absence now, Alyn for joining that program, also, of course, dear colleague Terry, and it was a great pleasure to have you here. You answered a lot of the questions in the debate, and I would only, as a concluding remark, make a few points. So first, of course, German Greens in the campaign will do exactly what you were saying, Alyn. Before we criticize the EU, before we start with new demands, we will praise what we already got. I think that is very important, to be positive in our basic messaging before we start speaking about what all has to change and so on. We will be clear on both, on the advantages and on the need for change. But exactly for the reason Terry's told us. Second, when it comes to what can we do in order to enlighten people more about the advantages, I personally, I'm not a great believer in pedagogics in this respect. I think the greatest program for convincing people of the need of Europe was the Erasmus program. And one of our campaign demands is that we get Erasmus for all financed with European money, so that all young people, not only students, but also those who don't go to university, so all of them have the possibility to spend some time abroad, to work, to learn abroad. I think that is absolutely critical. And beyond that was exactly said, Europe needs to become more social, so that people feel more in their everyday life, in their social needs, the advantages of Europe. And being social, of course, is not so much only about redistribution. It's about investing into our common future, so that people see that the future jobs coming from the green transformation, which Europe is driving forward, as well as in the digital revolution, that these changes are supported vigorously by Europe, so that people can feel advantages in all the regions of Europe. And lastly, I would like to say that a position we already took in the German debate today was that we were deadly against any childish reaction. We saw a lot of German politicians saying, don't grant any more extensions. By no means the British and the Scots and so on may participate in this election. So there were a lot of people, including Mr. Weber, saying that very clearly, that he didn't want to see a new election. And that was not the position of the German Greens. Of course, we are annoyed that there is so much unclarity. Of course, we feel that the Brexit is a totally useless discussion and we would end it as soon as possible. But this is a childish reaction to say, because we do not like it, we do not like to be faced with a partner who is so internally divided, therefore rather end it. That is a childish reaction. And as an economist, I would like to stress, losing Britain means to lose, from an economic perspective, the 19 smaller member states. So the economic capacity of the UK is equivalent to the 19 smaller member states, which shows this is as if only 9 members are left. of the current EU. So this shows what a disaster that is for Europe. It's not only a disaster for Britain, it is weakening us all to shape globalization and to shape our common future. And it's worth it listening longer to order and quite rather silly debates and in the House of Commons. We all make fun of this now in Germany. So the House of Commons became a really famous place, much more now in Germany than they were in the past. But it's worth it if there is a good hope that there will be a way out of this stupid Brexit, and German Greens will support that the UK gets the chance to decide their future without being pressured by childish reactions like this has to end now. So we were always very clear. Terry was extremely clear for us on this, but it's also basically a common view of the German Green Party. So Alyn, thank you a lot.
Great to see you.
A lot. And let's have another of these British Isles German encounters. And thanks to all the participants. And please, the next Europe Calling will come soon. The next one will be the online opening of our European campaign in Germany. So this will be a German-only program, but the next true European Europe Calling will come soon as well. And thanks to Max in Düsseldorf for making all that happen. Bye-bye.
Hello, Max.
Ciao, ciao.
Have a good night.